So I was asked by a couple of subscribers that I just met yesterday out in Henderson, Sean and Jordan. They were curious about the rigging setup I use for fishing for the brim out in the woods. Been having a lot of success out there. So I'll try to be pretty quick here. First thing is a very important bobber stopper, and I prefer these that have the string attached to it, and I'll show you exactly how that works in a bit. But of course what you do is slide the line through there, and then you have to make sure that you pull the string part that's going to be your bobber stopper up and pull the plastic tubing down to be discarded. If you do it the other way, you can't get the plastic tubing off. So very old school. It's a little bit of a string situation that stops the bobber, and then you cut these tag ends off when you tighten it down onto your line, and you can move that bobber stopper up and down. Sometimes the tension will vary, so I like to leave a little bit of tag in on each side so I can tighten it when I need to. But that's the first piece, and it comes along with very tiny little bead, and you have to make sure that your beads match the bobber stopper, because sometimes the hole in the bead can be too big and it'll slide over. So these are matched up together. Next thing, of course, is going to be the slip cork. I like to use slip corks. I think it makes the casting so much better and easier. Rather than having a long amount of line, let's say you're fishing 4 or 5 feet deep, you're really going to struggle to cast with all those trees and cypress and moss hanging down. So the slip cork, it allows me almost like a little dart. I can throw it out there real nice. But I just like these simple slip corks. These are real easy. This one has 2 different connections. You can slide the line right through both of these plastic tubes, and so it stays nice and smooth, doesn't get caught up, but it's also easy to adjust if you needed to adjust it for any reason. I prefer the white and red, or white and orange. Yesterday I was using a lighter greenish color, and it's a little bit tougher to see out there in that water sometimes with the glare, and everything out there is so green anyway. So very simple, but that's the little tiny cork, and really I like the smaller size, small to medium. Sometimes I'll use some longer ones that stand up a little taller if it's real windy or you have tough time seeing. And then next is the little weight that you use, the split shot. This one is about the smallest size I would go with. I love these little things. They, very easy to pinch on and off, and can be removable and reusable. This is from H&H Company. This is a size 7, and as you can see, you can buy 30 of these little things for $1.29. So that's just outstanding. I think if I was going to go, and again in a little rougher conditions, Henderson can be real smooth and quiet back in there, but I maybe would go a little heavier weight, but not much. I find that the lighter weight you use, the more you can really see what's going on with your cork, and you're going to be able to detect the bite a lot better. So I say stick with lighter and smaller, and you can still cast a mile with this with a nice reel setup with some thin line. And then lastly, I use this hook. This is a size 8. It's a Carlile hook is what it's called, and also made by the H&H Company. Sometimes I'll use a size 10, which is a little bit smaller, but I actually prefer the 8. It's a little sturdier, helps you to be able to remove it from the fish if you need to, when they're further down in the fish's mouth. A couple of things I also like, again, the long shaft here helps you to remove it, so you save fish. You end up not really killing a lot of the smaller fish that you want to release. And then if you can see here, there's a nice big loop opening for the line. You guys all know sometimes it can be tough to see how to thread that line through there. That makes it real easy. So size 8 Carlile hook, long shaft. It's got a little slant at the bottom. These things are unbelievable. If I'm really having trouble hooking them, sometimes I'll switch down to a size 10, and that you can catch just about any fish with that. So that's kind of the setup. I'll show you how I rig it here in just a bit. Alright, now I'll show you how I set this up. So first you take your bobber stopper and you thread the line through that black tube and pull it up a little ways. Doesn't really matter how far, just a little space to work. And then remember here, you want to tie or take your actual string, the bobber stopper part, and pull that to the top. And you're basically pulling that black tube off so it doesn't get caught up on top of all of your gear. So you just pull that off and discard it. So that's gone. And then now you have your little bobber stopper. It's just thread, and make it in different colors so you can see it a little bit, and then you just tighten that down. And see, by pulling on the tag ends there, it creates a nice little stop there for the bead that's going to be slid on next. And I'll go ahead and cut the tag ends and remind you again, I cut the tag ends with a little bit of space remaining on each one so that I can adjust this little bobber stopper as the day goes on. Sometimes it'll loosen up a little bit. It's cinched down onto your line, but it'll loosen up over time. Not too often, but by having a little bit of a tag end left, I can easily grab those two tag ends and tighten that down during the day. So keeps that bobber stopper nice and secure. You can see how I can slide it up and down to vary my depth, and that's the whole premise behind using that type of setup, slip cork. So the next thing, and this is usually the toughest part, these little beads. You have to make sure that your bead matches the bobber stopper so that the hole's not too big so that it won't slide through. You can see with failing eyesight it's tough to sometimes get it in there. Not too bad. Just thread that bead through there and you run the line all the way through, and then that bead will now connect up to the bobber stopper. Okay, so that's eventually again what's going to stop your whole setup. And then next you're going to thread your line through your slip cork. Pretty simple process. Similar hole as to that bead, so you got to find it with your eyesight and slide that line through there, and then just like that you've now got your bobber stopper, your bead, and your cork. Okay, so next in line is the split shot weight, but I do that last. First I'll put the hook on. This is a Carlile hook. This is a size 8. I like these. They're sturdy and a little bit longer shaft so that you can really remove them from the fish a lot easier, especially the small fish. It helps you to avoid killing those small fish. Really easy to get it in and out there. The longer shaft helps that as well, but man, this hook will pretty much catch any size brim or sockeye out there. If they're being a little bit finicky, you can use a size 10, which is a little bit smaller, and that certainly will do the trick. And then you tie the good old-fashioned fisherman's knot. This is a pretty easy knot to tie. Just loop it around about 5 or 6 times. And you put that tag end back through the upper loop, and then you kind of cinch it all together. But before you cinch it down too tight, you put some water or saliva on that knot, and that helps you to avoid burning the line and making for a weak knot. So that's it, the good old-fashioned fisherman's knot. Clip off the tag end, and then the last piece is you put your split weight on there. And again, this is a size 7, pretty small little split weight. I like to put it about maybe 3 or 4 inches above the hook. Normally I clamp it down with pliers. I'll use my teeth here, and so now that's secure a little bit above the hook, which gives you some play. I think that makes the cricket, the presentation, a little bit better for the fish. Also like to use worms. Worms tend to be actually a little easier sometimes because you don't have to change them as often. And then really ideally you can catch these fish with hair jigs. You'd use a jig head and tip that jig with a little piece of worm. I think they're catching a lot of fish that way as well. And again, it keeps you from having to change, put a new cricket on there every time. That can get a little tedious. But I do have some leftover crickets from yesterday. Might put those to use this afternoon. Pretty simple process. Can pick those up almost anywhere and not very expensive. But the fish sure do like those crickets. You can catch them on crickets almost all the time, even if they're not biting on other things. So that's your whole setup. You can see right now I'd have it set to about a depth of about 1.5 feet. Yesterday I was fishing 4 feet deep. So again, to change that, all you'd have to do is slide this little bobber stopper up higher, and you get your preferred depth that way. So that's the entire setup. Real simple. I'll show you my reel and my rod next. So man, we all know fishing can be expensive enough. I really like to keep it very simple and as low expense as possible. Ugly Stick helps me do that. I think with light gear and this type of fishing, an ugly stick works great. I know that trout fishing and that type of thing, maybe the feel is a little bit different, and you might want more sensitive gear, but this works really well. This is a 5-foot little spinning rod made by Ugly Stick GX2. I love these things. They come in 2-piece units if you want, sometimes 3-piece units, or you can just get them in the one piece. But this is the 5-foot version. I also like to use the 5/6, very short versions of rods, but still with tremendous feel. These have a nice tip to them, a real nice clear tip that's got some feel and definitely some give, and it makes the fighting the fish real fun. So that's the Ugly Stick. And then the reel is, I use the Shimano Syncopate. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but it's a little fire trigger reel. You'll see this is the 1000 FG, but the unique part of this reel is that it has a trigger here. If you can see that on camera, it's a trigger that I can use with one hand, and all I have to do is release that and fire that thing in there almost like a little pistol, and then it self locks right back in there and you're ready to go. So it's about the best setup you could ever imagine for catching those brim. One hand, I can do other things. I can guide the kayak and paddle and steer and do all those things. So real simple. That's the setup. The whole package here with the rod and reel is probably only about 50 bucks. Hard to beat, and the good thing again about Ugly Sticks, you can slam a door on them, step on them, they don't break. Alright, I hope you liked the video, and get out there and catch some fish. Good luck. Thanks.